Welcome back to the um, Pro Football Spot NFL Draft Hangouts. I'm Scott Carasik. I'm joined by Luke Polglaze this time. We're doing a post-draft recap of the 2015 draft. Um, and we might be joined throughout the show by some of our other analysts. Also, we're joined by Ethan Hammerman of Sportsnot, just to kind of get his ideas on the draft, because I know he's been one of the long-term guys I've always respected in this industry. So we'll kick it off. Ethan, what was your thoughts on who the best and worst drafts were?
That's a very hard question because I don't think you can judge a draft so quickly. I'll tell you that a couple of drafts that I really liked. I love what the Vikings did. Um, getting, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Trey Waynes, I think that he's a talented player, and as a number two cornerback, they could do a lot worse. Eric Kendricks was a great pick for them at linebacker, and they also filled in a whole bunch of other needs with the other picks as well. So I was a big fan of what they did. In that same division, the Detroit Lions. I mean, you talk about a team that got Laken Tomlinson, who could be a really, really good guard at the next level. Amir Abdullah, who's also potentially one of the better running backs in this class. Gabe Wright, who I thought was a great value pick in the fourth round. I think his upside is through the roof. But overall, I mean, when you look at drafts like this, you can't really judge them until later on down the road anyway. So it's a little bit hard for me to sort of immediately say that one team did awesomely or another team did badly. But definitely, there were some teams that I thought did a really good job of getting talent that also filled their needs.
Okay, that's fair. Luke, what were your thoughts on that?
I guess one team I thought that absolutely knocked it out of the park was the Browns. I mean, you talk about Danny Shelton, Cam Irving in the first round, and then they just took value pick after value pick. Nate Orchard in the second, Duke Johnson in the third. If you get even further down the board, I mean, they took Charles Gaines and Hayes Pollard and Ifo Ekpealamu, 3 picks, 6th and 7th. And you have those 3 guys who really, they have concerns that dropped them down the board, but they're going to have incredible potential. And, I mean, you talk about Ekpealamu. With his injury in the 7th round, if he turns into something in that already pretty potent Cleveland defense, could really be something. On the flip side, kind of mystifyingly to me, I thought the Patriots underwhelmed in the draft a bit. They had some really good picks and they had some head scratchers. Jordan Richards in the second, not as big a fan.
And quick question, who the hell takes a long snapper, let alone takes one in the 5th round?
It's funny because it was a need. It actually was a need because if you watch any Patriots games this year, their long snapper was awful. Danny Aiken pretty much left at least one snap every single game, low or high or to one of the sides. So it was a need. It actually was a need for the Patriots. And they've done this before. They took Jake Ingram in round 5 in 2000 and I believe it was 9. So this isn't unprecedented territory for them. And in my mock, I actually had them taking Joe Cardona. And I thought that was a good pick. Definitely think the Patriots, day 2 is a little bit weird with Jordan Richards and Geno Grissom, but I thought they made up for it day 3. Shaq Mason, Trey Flowers, all these guys, I thought they did a really good job. We're talking about teams that I was a little bit more questioning of. I thought that the Packers had some interesting picks. I mean, Demarius Randall in round 1, I'm not going to be able to understand that, although it sounds like they might play him at cornerback. And then the rest of their draft, they're just some pretty questionable picks. Ty Montgomery as a receiver, and then Brackman. There were some people there who I wasn't sure were draftable who they picked. So we'll see what happens with them. These are good teams, again, that just made some weird picks.
Well, Arizona made some really weird picks.
Yeah.
I don't understand taking a first-round offensive tackle when you've got Bobby Massey and Jared Veldier as your starting tackles. Marcus Golden, to me, was a late second at best, but that was accounting. I mean, I had like 8 or 9 other guys ahead of him. And then David Johnson I liked, but I thought he was a little bit too high. And one of the few guys that I had no clue who he was, Rodney Gunter, was picked in the 4th round. Never seen him play. I have no idea what he looks like. I need to go back and watch that one because I have no idea why they pick him that high. And then Shaq Riddick, J.J. Nelson, Gerald Christian. These guys are more athletes than football players. But that late, you're okay with it.
And kind of staying on the subject of the Cardinals, it was interesting to me them taking J.J. Nelson when they have a very similar guy in John Brown. And the more you think about it, they're just going to throw as much speed on the feet as they can.
That's basically the thought there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the Colts were the same way because they took Dorsett.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Colts draft with Dorsett makes a lot more sense than people are giving him credit for, because Dorsett's an inside or an outside receiver, and if you put Dorsett on the field behind Andre Johnson for a couple of years, let him learn how to play, you're good. The picks I didn't like for the Colts are DeJon Smith and David Perry. I thought those were both a little bit of a reach, each one of them. And then
I'm gonna stand up for DeJon Smith because I saw him in Mobile and he was a lot better than people think he is. He was really physical and he's a pretty good man cornerback. So I'm gonna give him some credit. I think he'll be a good player. I actually really liked a lot of their picks, but I just think Dorsett's kind of redundant with T.Y. Hilton, and they have Moncrief already. So it's sort of like, why are you taking them round 1? I think maybe a guy like Henry Anderson they took later. Maybe they took a guy like Malcolm Brown earlier. The Patriots thought they were going to take Malcolm Brown, and they really solidify that front 7. But instead, they just take a luxury piece to me. That was a little bit weird.
I think they're using the draft as a go best available, and they think they've got starters everywhere else. Kind of like what Carolina did. Carolina totally took luxury picks with Shaq Thompson and Devin Funchess, even traded up for Devin Funchess. And then, Darrell Williams, they don't have a left tackle on that team. They've got like 7 right tackles, and then they've got Jonathan Martin. And then Devin Funchess, I like the pick. I like trading up for him. It makes sense. Like, he's a good receiver. He's going to be a good receiver in Carolina. But come on, man. You can't ignore offensive tackle until the 4th round, especially when at this point you've only got 5 picks from all your trade ups. I didn't like what they did, and then they only had 5 picks, and then they went back and took another linebacker later in the draft than David Mayo, which made no sense whatsoever. So they got a backup for Luke Kuechly. The only pick that made any sort of logical sense for the Carolina Panthers was Cameron Artis-Payne, the running back, in like the late 5th round. That made perfect sense because he was a value there and he fits their scheme. Now, a draft I really, really, really liked was Detroit. I loved what they did. And I know Ethan already went in on that, but Laken Tomlinson. Ethan, you remember when we were in Mobile and we spoke with Laken and he was just one of the most intelligent guys we talked to?
The Patriots were going to take him if he was there, from what I heard. So, yeah, he's really smart. Pre-med. Yeah, that was a great pick. He's going to be a good player.
And as a player, he's Justin Blaylock Part 2, which, as a Falcons fan, that is a very big compliment. I like Justin Blaylock. If you can get the next Justin Blaylock at the end of the 1st round, you're doing pretty well.
That reminds me, though, another draft that I did not think was good was the Broncos. You trade up for Shane Ray, and then you pick Ty Sambrailo, who I'm not a fan of. I know that Scott and I saw him just struggle a lot in Mobile.
Remember in Mobile I said he'd make a great guard? I think that's the plan for him in Denver.
I heard they're playing the tackle.
You're talking with the Broncos guy here on the other end of the line, and I'm just chuckling here because I did not like the Broncos draft at all.
And then you got Hewerman, who I think actually could be really good with Peyton, but that was a little bit of a luxury pick to me. Their best pick, I thought, was Lorenzo Doss. I think he's really good. But otherwise, I'm not entirely sure of some of their picks. I thought there were some questions there.
So am I being a homer here when I say that I think the Falcons had arguably the best draft this past weekend?
I think you could be. You could be being a homer. I would submit that the Bengals also had a fantastic draft looking through their haul as well.
Well, that's why I said arguably.
I think
Arguably.
people are overrating Jalen Collins. But otherwise, I think the Falcons had a good draft. I also think that their number choice for Vic Beasley was awful. Although I get why he made the number pick. But
What do you pick?
44?
Oh, I thought that was
really bad. It's really bad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like the Falcons took a lot of really polarizing players. But for some reason, I think they all sort of make sense. Like, I really like Justin Hardy, the third receiver. I think Tevin Coleman, even though he might not be the best fit for his own blocking scheme, he's a really talented player. And Grady Jarrett was a really good value in round 5, although I think he wasn't quite as good as a lot of people made him out to be, which is why he slipped to round 5. But
I had mid-third on him. That's still good value for the top of round 5.
I also had I thought that he was around the same as Gabe Wright was, who went around 4. So I think it was good value for him, but I also think that, and I think with Michael Bennett to the Jaguars, who also had a great draft, by the way, it's sort of a similar concept where people overvalued them because a lot of these one-dimensional defensive tackles aren't that highly touted when it comes to the NFL because they really can only do one thing. But I thought the Falcons had a pretty good draft. I think it'll be interesting to see how Collins develops with that Seattle system because he could end up being a really good cornerback, but he is so football stupid that it really does scare me. He has some major, major work to do.
For what it's worth on Jarrett, what I'm told is the Broncos, he was among their top 5 targets at 28. So take that for what you will.
Then why don't you take him later? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Then I feel like you take him before round 5.
I don't know. To me, you cannot explain what the Broncos did. I mean, sure, you can explain it, but some of the picks are just head scratchers.
Well, I mean, the Shane Ray pick makes sense when they're like, oh, well, this guy can get high and still be our third rotational guy. Because that's what he is. He's not going to start over Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware.
No.
There's no possible way that he will.
He's the D Ford pick from last year for the Chiefs. That's the same exact thing.
Yeah, except they traded up for him, which makes it even stupider.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing this 44 for Vic Beasley, Hank? Or not Hank, Ethan?
I saw it earlier today. I think it was announced. Tyler tweeted it out. Tyler Lessard. It's a really bad number. I'm not a fan. If it's true, which I believe it is.
Oh, yeah. No, it's real.
The 40 to 49 strike.
It's a bad number. I mean, maybe when they can do something big.
I'm happy that they did that, honestly. I do like the 40 to the 49s being allowed for linebackers. And I think we're going to see a lot of guys, especially like the older ones, not older ones, but the guys my age, that 25 to 30 demographic that really like Pat Tillman and might have felt inspired by him actually wear 40 or 42 for Pat Tillman. Like, if I was playing in the NFL and I was a linebacker and I was wearing 50, I'd switch it to 40 this year just to be like, dude, Pat Tillman. It makes sense to me, but I'm probably the only one it makes sense to. I do like that he's wearing 44 instead of 97 though.
Yeah, meanwhile, Shane Ray's going to get stuck in 93, 98, or one of the 40s. It's so much prettier when it's a 50 on the back of a linebacker.
Well, to be fair, Vic Beasley's going to be a Leo, so it's more of a stand-up defensive end than anything else. All right. All right, Ethan. Who were some just total steals in the entire draft? Because you're always good at picking the guys that got drafted way too late that end up the starters.
Well, my homer pick is that Darryl Roberts from Marshall should have gone way before round 7 to the Patriots. I mean, he was the number 2 spark cornerback. He was really, really good in college, and I thought he was going to go a lot earlier than round 7. That's my homer pick, though, so you can take that with a grain of salt. I think the Buccaneers got a steal in Quan Alexander in round 4. I think the Ravens got a steal with Buck Allen and Mike Davis as well. So that entire 3-pick sort of stretch in round 4 um, was really, really just tons of steals. I think the Colts got a really nice pick in Josh Robinson. I think he's someone who could actually start for them this year. I'm mostly just focusing on day 3 guys because, those are the ones who are kind of like a little bit crazy that they sort of slipped this late. One more guy who I sort of just want to quickly call out is Quandre Diggs, who went to the Lions. We already talked about how great that draft was. He really impressed me in Mobile. He's going to be a really good slot cornerback. I think that was a really, really good pick by the Lions, who, as we've said, had a great draft.
He was kind of a jerk to Luke, though.
But I think, honestly, Luke might have taken it a little bit personally. But either way, he's a really smart guy. I've heard good things about him out the field. And that was actually one of the storylines in general that sort of really jumped out to me. Texas had a lot of talent this year, and I think Charlie Strong didn't do the best job of putting that talent together because they had a lot of players drafted who I think are going to be pretty good pros, and Charlie Strong wasn't that good of a coach this year. Because I'm thinking about, you got Quandre, you got Jordan Hicks, you got the wide receiver who signs rookie free agent somewhere, whose name I can't remember, both Malcolm Browns. They had a lot of talent this year.
They really do. And unfortunately, Texas really sucked. But I think it had a lot more to do with the fact that he kept picking guys off that had any sort of arrest or suspension or anything that was an issue. Who's your big steal, Luke?
One guy I think who could, I'm looking at the Titans depth chart now, the name is Trey McBride. They've got a lot of really solid number 2 guys, and I was really high on McBride. I had a third on him, and I mean, he's now in with Kendall Wright, Justin Hunter, Harry Douglas, DGB, so, there's a lot of crowded second-tier guys in there, but I think he could be a steal in the 7th round. I mean, he fell all the way to, 245?
Yeah, pretty crazy. I've got a little bit of a different one. I think San Francisco's pick of Blake Bell is probably going to be the biggest steal when we look back on this draft. And it's a bit of an interesting thought that a guy who played quarterback for most of his time in college is going to be the best tight end of this draft when we look back on it. Because the tight ends in this draft kind of suck. And Bell's going to give the 49ers like a Heath Miller kind of situation going on. A really good blocker who gets about 45 catches for 500 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns every year. And when you get that kind of production from a tight end, you can't really go wrong.
Patriots picked a quarterback tight end convert too, in A.J. Derby, who made some big plays this year for Arkansas. So I think that definitely that's a way to go. Scott, I got to ask though, since I know he's your guy, St. John Days ended up in a really good situation in Dallas. Do you think he makes that team?
Yeah. He's probably the best running back they have on the roster, which says more about the running backs they have on the roster than the fact that I think he's going to end up starting for them by the end of the season. St. John Days is a monster. He's a hell of a running back. I mean, I don't see how Darren McFadden fits the zone blocking scheme better than Days. I don't see how Lance Dunbar fits it better than Days. I don't see how Randall fits it better than Days. And Ryan Williams is done. His knee's shredded, so it's kind of pointless to look at him. If Days had played running back all 4 years, I guarantee you he would have been at the Senior Bowl. I guarantee you he probably would have been like a 3rd or 4th round pick. but he played quarterback his first 3 years. And he's not a quarterback. So I think when all's said and done, St. Days is going to be 1,000, 1,200 yard rusher year in, year out. And people are going to go, man, where the hell did this guy come from? But
I'm excited to see Shaq Mason in action in New England. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. That was one of my favorite picks. Him and Trey Jackson are going to eat people.
it's tough to look at Shaq and be like, man, how the hell is this guy who's so weirdly built and fullbacky so damn good at football? Like, he is a fullback in the body of a offensive guard. It just boggles the mind how quick he is for how fat he is. It just doesn't make sense. But totally one of my favorite players from this draft is Shaq Mason. And then, who called our boy Allie going in the second round? I'm just saying, guys. Ali Marpet, hell of a football player, went right where he should have went.
He's better than the other guard they drafted.
Well, they drafted Donovan Smith as a tackle, and I like Donovan Smith as a left tackle, as a developmental left tackle, but I don't think you need to start him right away because I think you're going to have a bad time. Like when you're supposed to French fry, you're going to have a bad time. For those who don't get that, that's a South Park reference referring to skiing. And I'm sorry for you if you've never watched South Park before because you have no life.
I mean, creators of South Park went to my school, so go Buffs.
South Park cows. Moo.
Yeah.
Donovan Smith kind of sucks, but that's okay. He was the worst offensive tackle in Mobile who got drafted.
And
And
yet,
there are some bad offensive tackles in Mobile who got drafted.
and yet he's better than anything the Bucks had playing left tackle for them last year.
Who were their left tackles last year? Donald Penn?
No, Donald Penn was with
He was on
Oakland.
Oakland.
They had Matt Pachin, Kevin Pamphile, and Anthony Collins, and Anthony Collins just looked overmatched and just dumb.
I actually kind of like Pamphile as a guard, but
Yeah, as a right guard, Pamphile would be perfect. I think their best offensive line that they could roll out would be Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet, cut Logan Mankins because he's old and he's not effective anymore, Evan Dietrich Smith, then have Pamphile at guard and Dotson at right tackle.
honestly, I would play Minkins at left tackle. He played it in New England, did a pretty good job. He's probably better than anyone else they have. I would not start Donovan Smith at tackle. I think that's a mistake. He's really bad. He can't deal with speed.
They like him at tackle. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, it's Lovie Smith, so
Well, yeah,
We
Lovie
all-
Smith's an idiot.
we all know what the NFL thinks about Lovie Smith.
Yeah, Lovie Smith's an idiot. And then a draft that might boggle some people's minds is New Orleans, but I thought they had a really good draft. And outside of their second day, where they took Kikaha and Garrett Grayson and P.J. Williams. Because P.J. Williams is a drunk. It's not his first DUI. Damian Swan sucks. Kikaha, that high. But Stephon Anthony, Davis Tull, Tyler Davidson, you can't really go wrong with those picks. And then the Marcus Murphy pick I enjoyed because I think he might end up being their second best running back when all's said and done. He's way better than Kerry Robinson or Edwin Baker. And Tim Hightower shouldn't even be in the NFL right now. And then Andres Pete in the first round is probably going to start at right tackle for them this year. They'll have Armstead. They need a guard, so they could probably move Streif there. But Armstead, Unger, Evans, and Pete are probably guaranteed starting roles for that team.
I actually love the Marcus Murphy pick just because of Travaris Cadet leaving in free agency. I think he's going to come in, be that role and more.
I think he's going to end up starting when all's said and done. The only thing, like, they've got Ingram and Spiller, and then Kerry Robinson, Edwin Baker, and Tim Hightower. And Baker and Hightower suck. So,
I actually really like their draft, and I'm like one of the few people who really gets the Grayson pick, but he's a really interesting developmental guy for me.
I
I
just
like a
don't think
lot of
he's
aspects
that
of his
high.
game. I think he was slightly underrated because people just wanted to blame him as part of this bad quarterback class, and he's not a perfect prospect by any means, but in round three, I think that was a better pick than Sean Mannion in round three, um, for sure.
Sean Mannion sucks.
And
I don't
Yeah,
I
understand
love
why they didn't take Brett Hundley.
well, I really like
that's a mystery.
Kikaha too. I think Kikaha, um, if he was healthy, I think he would probably pretty easily be a first round pick. And he definitely fits that scheme really well. I'm interested to see how Rob Ryan uses him. So I really don't mind that pick either. Now, if we want to talk about a bad draft, and we just talked about Sean Mannion, I don't get what the Rams did for much of the draft. I love the Gurley pick. I think it makes so much sense, and I really like Rob Havenstein. But some of those other picks there, man, I don't know. If Sean Mannion starts for them this year, that's going to be really bad.
I mean, I can't complain about the Gurley pick, even though it's the first time in NFL history that a running back coming off of an ACL surgery went in the top 10 picks. Just a little fun fact there. And I get tired of hearing D'Orlando Ledbetter of the AJC keep going. The Falcons should have taken Gurley because why? You needed a pass rusher. Shut up, D-Led. But no, like the pick right there honestly didn't make sense because I thought they were going to go with a quarterback because they need a quarterback. But what can you do?
I agree. They should have gone with Huntley over
They should have
Mannion.
gone with Hundley.
Sean Mannion is bad, and so honestly, so is Jamon Brown from Louisville. He was maybe the third best lineman on the team this year. Bud Sasser, he might not have been the best draft eligible receiver from Missouri. I thought Jimmy Hunt was better. I like Bryce Hager. They took a lot of just like weird guys overall though, and I love the Gurley pick. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I get what they're trying to do. They want to have more power, but I didn't like some of their other picks, and I also have no confidence in Jeff Fisher running a football team whatsoever.
Yeah, it's more of Jeff Fisher running a football team. I don't know what the hell he's doing.
Jeff Fisher is like if Mike Smith kept getting his contract renewed over and over again.
With two different teams. But the difference is Mike Smith actually won some games to be like, okay, well, Mike Smith, you brought the team to another winning record. So, okay, you can have your contract renewed. But the minute Smith started losing games is the minute he got fired. You notice that? Because Arthur Blank doesn't play. He wants a Super Bowl. He doesn't want this BS, like, crap-ass team that was out on the field the last 2 years. That Mike Smith put out there the last 2 years. He wants a team that actually fights hard and plays hard. And the more I did not like the signing of Dan Quinn originally. I'm just gonna put that out there. Did not like it originally. Was not a fan of it. But when we were in Mobile, and I spoke to a bunch of different scouts, and I spoke to a guy that worked with him at Florida. And the guy that worked with him at Florida was like, man, I love Quinn. He's a great guy. He's one of the best people I've ever known. I was like, all right, maybe I'm wrong. And then a bunch of people that I talked to who were reporters for the Falcons kept saying, Parks and Rec, he's Chris Traeger. He's just so positive and upbeat, and like he just brings the energy up, and everybody wants to play for him and work hard. Nah, 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 nah. And they go, and then Dimitrov is like Ben Wyatt. The calm, collected, this is the plan, I got your plan, let's execute it kind of guy. So together they work well, they make a lot of sense. And you saw the fruits of their labor this past week when they had a logical, concise draft for the first time in God knows how long. I'd probably say 2008 was the last draft that they've had that was anywhere close to this good. Oh, Anyway, Ethan, who are your all right, so long snapper, 5th round. What in the world?
He was a need. It was a need pick. And apparently the Patriots, every player the Patriots drafted on day 4 was specifically targeted to be a Patriot. So they wanted every single player that they picked. And Cardona was told 2 weeks before the draft by Bill Belichick that he was going to be picked in round 5, which I find really funny because they did not have a round 5 pick when they were going into the draft. But
Didn't they trade down and pick one up?
They traded down with the Browns, and they got a 4th and a 5th and a 6th in that trade down, where they were going to take Trey Flowers, but they had the 2nd pick in round 4, so they had the flexibility to trade down. But yeah, they're all about sort of like, if they have very specific things they want to fill in the draft, they did. And they got a lot of depth on their front 7, they got a lot of depth on their offensive line, and they also got a long snapper who they think could be one of the better long snappers in the NFL immediately. Fun fact, apparently he snaps the ball faster than any NFL long snapper in the history of the league because he has 40-mile-an-hour snaps.
Okay, then.
And another person brought up a good point that if they move back the extra point, that's going to get more important.
Why is that?
Because you want the snap to get there a little bit more directly. And I think apparently line of scrimmage might stay where it is right now, but they just might move back where the person kicks the ball. I'm not entirely sure. But someone brought it up, so it was interesting.
Right, so that doesn't even make logical sense. So the guy's going to be in the same exact spot, snap the ball.
I mean, I don't know the rules. I don't think it's going to actually end up happening, but somebody brought it up. So overall, the Patriots really like the guy, and I think Belichick will get him out of serving the Navy. So we'll see.
I'm just saying, on the surface, it sounds kind of, what's the word? Wonky. You're going to have 30-yard snaps? It just doesn't make sense.
I'm not entirely sure about the details. I just heard that there was conversation that it might be more important in the future than it is right now. So we'll see. But definitely, Danny Aiken wasn't cutting it. They need a new long snapper. They drafted the best one they think's come out in a while. So they were very happy with that pick.
And to be fair, I think if we're going to jump on the Patriots for taking a long snapper in the 5th, the San Francisco 49ers drafted a punter the pick before that, and they have Andy Lee, who was one of the best in the game. And with that kind of roster, that is, I think, also a questionable choice.
Anytime you take a punter, a kicker, or a long snapper in any round before the 7th, you just wasted your pick. Or even the 6th. You can get away with the 6th. Because 6th and 7th round picks, as long as they contribute on special teams, they're good picks. So if you get a guy who's your punter for 2 decades, it's a great pick in the 6th round. You get a guy who's your kicker for 2 decades, it's a great pick in the 6th round. You get a guy who's a long snapper, not so much.
And yet the Patriots picked Stephen Gostkowski, and I want to say round 4 in 2006, and he's been one of the best kickers in football ever since, and probably has won them games just by being a really good kicker. So I think it just depends on sort of how you view the draft, because if you feel like the Patriots did, that already it's going to be really hard for rookies to make your team to begin with because you have such a deep roster that, you know what, if you feel like long snapper is a need, why not fill it? Because is random wide receiver going to draft there have a better chance to make the roster than the long snapper? Probably not.
And we're not exactly talking Janikowski drafted in the 1st round levels. I mean, this is further down in the draft at least.
That was the epitome of an Al Davis pick. I mean, that...
If he could run a 4.3, it would be a total Al Davis pick.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, in terms of stupidity. And then they took Shane Leckler in the second round. Like, I understand having the best kicker and the best punter in football for however long they were made sense. But come on, man.
First and second, yeah.
A second
And,
round
and
punter, a first round
so,
kicker. You wonder why your
where do
team
you think
sucks
you
so.
draft Janikowski in the redraft? Because I think round 4 would be a fine place to take the kicker who, to this day, still probably has the strongest leg in football.
Yeah, the fourth round, I'd probably be like, well, it's a little high, but it's forgivable if he plays for you for 20 years. I mean, we're in year 16 for Sebastian Janikowski. He's 37 years old and he still kicks the shit out of the ball. Like, I'm cool with that. That makes a lot of sense to me. You know, this is the 15th straight year that he's been in the NFL knocking the crap out of the ball. Yeah, go for it. But when you're talking a first round pick, kicker is not a pillar position. You don't take kicker in the 17th pick. Especially in an NFL draft that was pretty strong in 2000. The guys that they passed up to take Sebastian Janikowski, Chad Pennington, who was better than any quarterback they had throughout that time period. Sean Alexander, better than any running back they've had in that time period. Keith Bullock, one of the better linebackers in the league. Anthony Beck, the solid tight end. Probably not a first rounder, but at least a solid player. Ian Gold, Mike Brown, Marvell Smith, all of them Pro Bowlers. Chad Clifton, a Pro Bowler. Probably one of the better left tackles in the league until he had to retire. Marcus Washington from the Colts. I mean, you're just going down. There's so many different players. I mean, hell, Lavernius Coles would have made more sense at 17 than a friggin' kicker. Kabir Gabaha Biamia, who wound up going in the 5th round, would have made more sense than Sebastian Janikowski.
How was Dante Hall not a Raiders pick? That would have been a perfect Raiders pick.
That would have been a perfect Raiders pick. Mark Bulger would have made more sense. He was a franchise quarterback for a couple years there. I mean, hell, Tom Brady would have made sense.
A kicker in the first over Tom Brady.
They could have used the whole, well, we don't have a franchise quarterback, and we think this guy can be a franchise quarterback excuse. And then if Tom Brady, even if Tom Brady didn't become, Tom Brady, and he would have been on the other side of the tuck rule, it would have made more sense.
Anyway, here's a question. What do you think was the worst pick of round 1?
Honestly, trading up for Shane Ray, because Shane Ray was a second-round talent. But if I had to go with the second worst pick, Demarius Randall just kind of is blinking red right now on my screen in terms of horribleness.
I'm going to go with a slightly different tact. The Bengals should not have taken Cedric Abohi that high, especially the pick before Bud Dupree, who's now going to get a lot of sacks on Cedric Abohi. I think that's going to be a wonderful bit of serendipity as we look forward, where when the two teams play, Dupree is going to destroy him, and it'll be entertaining to think about that. It'll be a talking point for Chris Collinsworth for years to come.
Well, not only that, but their second-round guy, I mean, Jake Fisher, I like him way more than I ever liked Way. Like, they drafted a better tackle with their second-round pick.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because welcome to how the Bengals view the NFL draft. I don't understand why they took 2 tackles except for looking at the contract situations. And when you look at the contract situations, you go, oh, well, Andre Smith's in the last year, and Andrew Whitworth's in the last year of their contracts, and you just work for a year, and then you cut both or let them both walk, and you got some cheap old tackles. Now, if Agboyi plays right tackle and Fisher plays left tackle, that's going to make a lot more sense because Fisher's a way better athlete and a way better fit there. But I mean, even in the second round, they could have taken Amir Abdullah and gone with the ridiculousness at running back and having a killer trio. They could have taken, Clive Walford at tight end to replace Jermaine Gresham. That would have made more sense, having Eifert and Walford. They could have taken Hronis Grasu at center, and because he's better than whoever the hell they have. Because they drafted a center a couple years, or it was either last year or 2 years ago. And
there's that kid out of North Carolina, Bodine.
Yeah, Bodine. Bodine's terrible. Bodine should not be starting in the NFL. He is terrible. Like, has no idea what the hell he's doing making line calls. Just does not make sense. Or they could have taken Randy Gregory, but what do I know? I mean, Randy Gregory only would have been a better pass rusher than Michael Johnson. He only would have been, their best pass rusher over Carlos Dunlap. Gregory, Dunlap, Johnson, and Hunt would have been scary to watch as a group together. But again,
granted, I mean, I think Randy Gregory, while some of his issues are a little bit trumped up, because, it sounds like he does have some mental problems that he has to get sort of like counseled through, and I think that he could find that path. I get why teams passed on him because it is a little bit scary, and it is an investment to make. So I'm not going to fault teams if they don't feel like they have the infrastructure to help Randy Gregory not taking Randy Gregory. Because you're only taking him if you know that you have the infrastructure to help him get over whatever his issues are. And I know for a fact that, I mean, he slept through interviews during this process. He needs to get on track. And there are some legitimate questions that he might not be able to do that. So I'm not going to fault teams. I think the Jets actually probably should have taken him. I think that would have been a great fit. Dallas clearly did take him, and they think that they can help him. But I'm not going to fault teams if they don't want that responsibility on them for passing on him.
And that's fair, because they don't want to screw up, or they don't want to see him screw up because they didn't have the right infrastructure. All right, a surprisingly good draft that I thought went down was in Oakland. And just looking at every pick, each one made sense in its own way. Amari Cooper, number one wide receiver to give to your quarterback. Mario Edwards, a 5 technique to play one of the ends and learn behind Justin Tuck how to play the role. Clive Walford, a starting tight end for that roster to complement Michael Rivera. John Feliciano, he's going to be competing for a starting guard spot. Heaney and Bell are both going to look very good competing for linebacker roles. Max Vales fits their Leo fit. Anthony Morris is kind of that spark god type deal that Seattle was taking. Just a very athletic player. And I like Andre Dubose and Dexter McDonald as just athletic talents who can make an impact. I thought what the Raiders did made a lot of sense, a lot of logical sense. And Amari Cooper is going to have a lot of fun playing with Derek Carr because Carr is probably the best quarterback they've had, or that Amari Cooper's had in his entire career. Except, or at least between college and pro, because he did play with Teddy in high school.
I think another draft that deserves more credit than it's getting is the Titans. Obviously they pull in Mariota and Dorial Green-Beckham at the top, but Jeremiah Putesi, Angelo Blackson, I wasn't as huge a fan of that, but Fowler, David Cobb in the 5th, I love. DeAndres Mount in the 6th, and Andy Gallick in the 6th, and Trey McBride obviously in the 7th. I thought that was a very well put together draft. they have a lot of holes on that roster, and my immediate gut feeling was they should have traded down to allow the Eagles to come up for Mariota just because they have so many holes, but they really went around the block and addressed a lot of those. I thought they did very well.
And another team I thought did really well was Pittsburgh. They got Dupree, they got Senquez Golson, who's one of my personal favorites at cornerback. Duran Grant's going to be a really nice compliment to him as well. Sammy Coates, good player. Jesse James, really nice developmental tight end prospect. They missed out on Max Williams by a pick, so they sort of circle back for the poor man's Williams. And then they got Anthony Chiquillo and Gerard Holloman in round 6 and 7. You can't do much better than that in those rounds.
No, you can't. And Holloman's probably going to end up starting for him, which is the crazy part.
That's a scary thought.
Your 7th-round pick might be your best offensive line, or your best defensive back. I thought what the Jets did, even though it was very unorthodox, made a lot of sense. Taking Leonard Williams when you've got Damon Harrison, Mo Wilkerson, and Sheldon Richardson on the surface is kind of like, well, you don't really need an interior lineman. That doesn't really make sense. And then you look at it and you go, well, who's the depth? And they don't really have any depth. So Williams comes in and he's automatically the super sub, and you've got times when you're playing Richardson inside, Wilkerson inside, Williams inside. You've got Deion Simon and TJ Barnes also rotating in just for some snaps. And then Stephen Bowen and Kevin Vickerson are both past their prime and probably going to get cut just because they're not that good anymore. So you really just made the roster better, and you now have a 2 deep at each spot that is worth playing. It's worth having those guys in there.
My immediate first gut reaction with hearing that pick was, with the trade talk for Mo Wilkerson, was if they wanted to trade him, they just got his replacement.
Oh, easily. Very, very, very easily. They got his replacement if they wanted to trade him.
And I'm also
I don't think they want to trade
probably tried to trade the pick before they ended up making the pick. So I can't hate on it that much. I thought Devin Smith was a good pick too, but I didn't really love the rest of their draft. Lorenzo Molden's a great story, but I don't think he's that good of an edge rusher. I actually think they probably wanted Randy Gregory and they didn't get him. And then Bryce Petty, not good. I'll be interested to see if he ends up getting significant playing time in New York, because if he does, that bodes well for the Patriots, because he's not a very good quarterback.
You're not a fan of Petty.
I like Hundley more. I thought they should have taken Hundley.
I think that's fair.
Hundley fits them a little bit better.
Yeah, he does. He fits them a bit better. But I think it's just one of those situations where they wanted to take a guy who they felt could potentially develop into that quarterback. I love the Jarvis Harrison pick. I think he'll start over James Carpenter because I think Carpenter's hot garbage. I think Dakota Dozier finally gets to move inside to center. And hopefully they cut Brian Winters because Brian Winters is garbage too. They've got talent in New York. They just need the right coach, and now they've got it, I feel, in Todd Bowles. I think that was the biggest thing holding them back. Like, Rex Ryan's a great defensive coach, but on offense he has no idea what the hell he's doing. And say what you will about Chan Gailey, but if you want a guy who can develop and train a quarterback the way that a guy like Norv Turner does, Chan Gailey is one of those guys that you want to bring in and say, hey, I'm simplifying the offense. The dude made Reggie Ball look like a competent college quarterback. Reggie Ball is probably the worst quarterback I've seen in my life. And Chan Gailey still made him look competent. Sure, every other play it was just throw it to Calvin. But still, who cares?
I'm not sure I agree that he made him competent. I mean, the guy had under a 50% completion percentage his college career. That's not competent.
If you saw the passes that he was attempting, you'd go, oh my God, how did he complete that many?
Either way, though, I'm still a little bit questionable on Gailey. I do think Devin Smith is going to be a nice little game changer for them because whoever their quarterback is, uh, he'll give them a deep threat that they don't have right now. So I like that pick for them a lot. But anyway, before I head out, because I got to head out in a couple of minutes, I guess just quickly, who is your current pick for offensive and defensive rookies of the year based on just what teams they ended up on?
We'll close the show on that because I like that as a nice closing topic. For offensive rookie of the year, that's going to be a tough one. I always like going with a running back for that or a quarterback for that, just because I think it makes sense because those are going to be the top two positions that get love. But I don't see any way Winston or Mariota win the award because I don't see either of those teams winning a lot of games. So I go down and I look, you know what, Melvin Gordon in San Diego just makes too much sense. They've got a good run blocking line. He's a beast at finding holes. He'll start right away for them. And I think out of all the picks in this year's draft, he's going to be the offensive rookie, putting up 1,200 to 1,300 rushing yards, probably scoring 10 to 12 touchdowns. Now, defensive rookie of the year, it's either a linebacker who gets a crap ton of tackles, or it's a offensive lineman, or not often, a defensive lineman that gets a crap ton of sacks. And I'm going to sound like a homer here, and I'm okay with it. Vic Beasley is probably going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year with his 11-sack campaign, feasting on the crap that is the NFC South offensive tackles, the AFC South offensive tackles, and the NFC East offensive tackles. Because he gets to go up against some of the worst names in football this year, playing in a role where all he's going to be doing is lining up, playing the one technique, and attacking every single play. He gets to play against such studs as Luke Jekyll, Taylor Lewin, Anthony Costanzo, and Dwayne Brown, who, let's be honest here, none of those inspire confidence in terms of pass blocking. And then in the NFC South, he faces Michael O'Hare twice, Teron Armstead twice, and Jamar Dotson or Donovan Smith twice, which, again, doesn't really inspire that much confidence. His toughest challenge is going to be the NFC East when he gets Tyron Smith, Jason Peters, and Trent Williams, who actually have talent. But then they still also have to face Will Beatty, who sucks. So I think he's going to have a lot of sacks. I think he's going to have a lot of fun hitting quarterbacks all throughout the year. And then the Falcons get to play some not so good teams throughout the year. So I'm going to enjoy it.
I'm looking down this list as well. I agree. I think Vic Beasley is the easy defensive rookie of the year, and I don't think it's close. My heart pulls me towards Todd Gurley just because I loved him so much, and with all that uncertainty at quarterback, he's going to just get the rock repeatedly. But I'm actually going to go with Amari Cooper, just because Derek Carr finally has a weapon of some sort. I mean, if you look at the depth chart last year, their number one, number two guys are basically number 3 and number 4 now. So I think Amari Cooper is going to have a huge year.
All right, Ethan, who are your picks? We'll close the show with that.
Well, I'm going to make it unanimous on defense. I think it's going to be Vic Beasley as well. So you're not a homer for thinking that. He's in a really good position to succeed. So can't disagree with that. On offense, I got to go with Jameis. And I think it's because he's in such a good offensive system. I think he'll put up the numbers that are good enough where he'll get sort of a lot of credence and press. And I think it'll be close enough where people are going to want to give him the award. I think he's going to throw his share of interceptions, but, I mean, him with Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson, that's going to be fun to watch, and Fair and Jenkins. That Bucs team is really interesting to me. I think that they could potentially do good things, but the issue is that their coaching staff is awful. But I gotta go with Jameis. I think Jameis is a fair pick, considering that Gurley's me out for most of the year. I don't think he's going to get a full-time share when he gets in. Still don't have complete confidence in Derek Carr. And unless Amari is Odell Beckham Jr., which some people think he could be, I don't think he'll win Rookie of the Year. And I like the Melvin Gordon pick, but just be a little bit different. I'll go with Jameis.
I think that's fair. All right, guys. Well, that was our post-draft recap show. You can find it on YouTube and always keep watching it back. So if you want to call me an idiot in 3 years when all my predictions are wrong, feel free. And if you want to read all of our stuff, we're going to be at Pro Football Spot. Ethan's at Sportsnot. Have a good night, everybody.